The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles return to the big screen with a fresh take on the characters and a standout visual style. Let's find out how both a new and longtime fan feel about the critically praised Mutant Mayhem. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Do we even have last names?
I'm disappointed. I was hoping the word milk or milked would be in the quote.
I know.
But
the movie did it enough for the both of us.
We'll get to all that. This is a movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a movie. We usually work through franchises or maybe a director's filmography. We are, of course, doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. Earlier in the year, we did all 5 live-action movies. Last week, we did the 2007 CGI animated film. And here's the newly released CG film but it's got like other animation kind of on top of it as well. It's got a very distinct style. So we'll get into that. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning. But yeah, obviously you're probably at least vaguely familiar with what the Ninja Turtles are. But this movie does do the backstory, explains things. It does act as a new entry point for young kids, which obviously I think is the goal. Is Nickelodeon and co are hoping against hope that this will start a whole new generation of Turtles fans.
You say against hope, but I mean, every time they've done it, the series has gone on for a while, so there has to be some amount of making bank off that.
Well, the TV shows, yes, but not movies.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
The 2007 film didn't get a sequel. The 2014 movie got one sequel and then died. So movies, it's not been as hot. The animated series, they've consistently had success, but this is a little bit different. So they're hoping for a new big success. And I think it's very easy to say, hey, they saw Into the Spider-Verse, they said, hey, we can do something similar. But when I watched this, just a few minutes into this film, I was like, you know what? I see why Spider-Verse let them know it was okay to do a more adventurous style, but I am actually going to die in the hill that this is a very different visual style to Spider-Verse, and it's not just copying it. Even, don't get me wrong, I think Spider-Verse is why this was allowed to happen. I think that's why they've been allowed to flex their muscles this way, and why maybe the studios saw potential money making because Spider-Verse did so well. But
yeah, I just before we started recording, I was watching back our Patreon exclusive video where we responded to the trailer when it came out.
Oh yeah.
And I particularly latched onto the one comment you made where pretty much since like the dawn of CGI animation to Spider-Verse, everything was just kind of that Pixar style.
The same, everything
just the same sort of thing that was like, this is going to work.
Some slight deviations, obviously, but nothing too extreme. Yeah,
but Spider-Verse was the first one that came out and said, like, well, no, we don't have to do it that way. We can do it a different way. And I think that you're right. This movie Spider-Verse opened up the door for this movie, but it does its own thing. It really makes it its own different style. Yeah,
it's just something as simple as like when like an explosion goes off, like you have the CG explosion, but then on top of that you have all the little scribbles, like it's really rough animation on top, and it's a really distinct style. And before we get into where we like the movie, I will just say I thought the visuals were fantastic. I thought the animation style looked gorgeous, and I was into it pretty much the entire time.
It was so weird because there's a point maybe like 20 minutes into the movie or so, pretty early on, where you just forget it's there. Like it's just, you accept it. It's just a part of what it is. And then only every once in a while when it does something big and bombastic or something new, like the explosions and stuff, do you come back and you're like, oh yeah, they're being creative with that.
Yeah, the other one that was sticking out to me is every time there was like a very prominent light in the scene, there'd be like the little scratches of light rays over the actual light beam.
Yeah.
And it just had a kind of, and it wouldn't just be static either, it would sort of change between the frames as if we're watching like an old flickery movie. But it was a really distinct style, and it felt like we want this to have the flourishes of like comic books in 2D animation, but because it's CG underneath, we get to do more advanced things that 2D animation couldn't do. For example, in the very first scene, there's a camera move where it does a sort of 360. You can't do that in 2D animation because you can't like move in a 3D space in the same way. So the modern technology lets them do that, but they still have all these flourishes on top and this distinct style that felt to me like a cool bit of comic book art. And the Turtles, after all, do originally come from comic books, even though they're maybe more known for the animated series and stuff. But yeah, so visual style off the charts. I'm sure we'll bring up some other little things as we talk about it, but this is a new version. It's got new versions of the characters. We'll talk about designs, we'll talk about all that. But it does do the origin. These are probably the youngest feeling Turtles we've ever had. They actually feel like they're in their early teens as opposed to, kind of just basically adults, but they're teenagers for attitude.
that's the one comment that I made to my girlfriend after I watched the movie. I was like, this is the first time where I feel that the word teenage really applies. Yeah. Like, it's every other time it feels like, no, they're like about to hit 20, like technically teenagers, but they're adults for all intents and purposes. This is the first time where I'm like, no, these are kids that are like just barely hitting puberty. That's where we're at here.
Yeah, so that's very different, and we'll talk about all the new things. But there's a villain plot. We have a villain called Superfly that comes from Baxter Stockman. We'll talk about that. But without any further ado, I'll just ask the simple question. David, what did you think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem?
I could beat around the bush. I could do the whole like, oh, well, I really think this, that, and blah, blah. But I'm just going to flat out say it. Best Turtles movie. Best Turtles movie.
Absolute. Controversial hot takes coming in with the no, to be fair,
I don't care.
Before we went to see this, the Rotten Tomatoes score was very promising. I wanted, it was at like 94, 95% or something silly like that. It was like, okay, all right, this may actually be really good. I did pretty much love it. I will say there are one or two nitpicks. Okay. I didn't really like Splinter. We could talk about that a bit more detail later.
I'm not going to say it's a perfect Turtles movie, but I think that comparatively, especially, to the Michael Bay ones, to the animated one we just did last week, to even the 80s ones, this is the first one that felt like it really got the soul of what I think that kids saw in the Turtles back in the 80s. That sort of fun and like being able to just have fun with these turtles, and yet they're still cool at what they do
also,
as well.
Minor correction, you mean 90s movies, none of them are in the 80s.
Sorry, my bad, 90s.
I see why you made the mistake.
The cartoon show.
The cartoon started in the 80s. I see why you made the mistake. I see what you're saying with that. It still feels, to me, it feels like the original feeling of Turtles, though, was a darker vision, and I think the first live action movie sort of melded everything basically perfectly to me. And I wish the sequels to that went a different way. I think I described what my perfect trilogy would be based on that first movie back when we did that movie. To me, this is not so much like nailing what the original intent was, so much as that I do think it's a very nice evolution into a new version that I can really get on board with the majority of. Like I say, I don't really like Splinter in here that much. We'll talk about that in detail, especially in spoilers. Which is not to say that I hate everything about him. I do think the character arc is an interesting choice, and I do think it's nice that he does have one. I just don't think that the characterization his personality and the Jackie Chan performance, and I don't dislike Jackie Chan, but he felt like a weird choice as soon as they announced him, and to be honest, it felt weird in the movie. It didn't quite work for me. But
this is far and away the least cool Splinter. I will give you that.
I want wise Japanese Splinter, right? That's not to say that it can't be funny. I mean, all versions of Splinter have had a bit of comedy, right? I made another funny. The animated movie we did last week, he was watching Gilmore Girls. Like, there's always a bit of comedy with Splinter. There absolutely is. And I think the story choices made with them here make a lot of sense, but the actual like voice and dialogue that he has, and then some of the comedy bits he has towards the end, didn't work for me too much. But the Turtles themselves, I enjoyed being around. The animation style was gorgeous. They had an arc. It's not completely a new arc. There's definitely, but you can definitely see this story in different forms told through other Turtle stories. But it really goes for it. I think some of them sound great. The only like minor thing I would maybe say is that Raphael should sound like he's from Brooklyn. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it. I want Raphael to sound like he's from Brooklyn. It's just in my head. That's what he sounds like. But
I get it in the sense of, it is tradition. It is what we expect it to be. The character is,
Yes.
but I can't see any in-story reason how they could have possibly pulled that off.
I don't know. He watches a lot of 1993 Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, that explains so much about his character. Actually,
I'm trying to think of a movie that's mostly Brooklyn centered.
yeah.
No,
He just really grew up on Taxi Driver.
Yeah. No, like, and I think what's interesting is that, so the characterizations are there. Obviously, Donnie's the nerdy one, Mikey's the fun-loving one, Leo's the leader. I think Leo, out of the four of them, is the one that feels the most nailed to me. As far as the kind of early story goes, where he's trying to be the leader, and that's kind of part of his story. Raph does have his rage, and he does have his. But what's interesting to me is they didn't go like balls deep into Raph having conflict with Leo yet, which is not a bad thing, because I actually think that's something you could easily save for, like, as they're getting older, their hormones are getting more wacky, and his anger comes out in a bigger way as time goes on. Whereas here he's more sort of like comic relief, like angry, I would say, more than anything.
I would say each of the turtles has their own little forms of comic relief, but he's definitely. When it comes down to his anger stuff, there's one part in this where, we get to her, but April O'Neil, she has a bunch of like questions for the turtles, and one of them is, how many people has the red one stabbed? And that's the kind of comic relief that he brings to this, where it's like he's got some problems, and everyone's just aware of this.
So now characterizations for the turtles are great. The other mutants, which are in there, we'll get to them more specifically in spoilers, I think, but the more notable ones that stick out, obviously Bebop and Rocksteady are the most famous because they're from the cartoon, and then the second tier would be Leatherhead and Mondo Gecko, who are kind of more, at least I've heard of them from the comics.
I was gonna say, I knew of Leatherhead. Everyone else was completely fresh to me.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of smaller ones that I didn't really know, but I'm sure they're from a comic. I'm sure they're from a deep pool.
Oh yeah.
That I just don't remember or never read. So that's all cool stuff. April's April's also a teenager, which is an interesting take. This is definitely a very different April O'Neil, who's currently still going to high school and stuff like that. And part of the movies, the turtles would dream that they could go to high school, so we'll get into that. And the action's pretty good. The animation style lends itself to a lot of fun action sequences where it feels like we're actually getting to really enjoy the action. I feel like sometimes when I'm watching like a CG movie, action sequences feel like it's more about function than it is about actually flourishing. And I feel like here it gets to flourish, if that makes sense.
I mean, there's probably one of my favorite entire sequences of the movie is the multi-stage fight scene that's like a montage between 5 different locations, because it just does it's just playing with the art form at that point. It's like it doesn't even need to be a fight scene, it's just a great scene to watch.
We got, obviously there's a bunch of kids that are voicing the turtles, so I don't really know any of them, but Cynthia Utrom, who's like sort of this villainous behind the scenes character.
It's like the B plot villain.
Yeah, that's Maya Rudolph. Rocksteady's John Cena, which is amusing because in the last live action movie, a wrestler played. Was it Rocksteady? I think it was Rocksteady. It wasn't Bebop. Yeah, it was Rocksteady. So Seth Rogen is Bebop. Rose Byrne is Leatherhead. Giancarlo Esposito is Baxter Stockman, which I have to feel ashamed that I didn't notice his voice, because I feel like he's got a pretty distinct voice. Maybe he was doing a slightly, he wasn't just doing his normal voice, so maybe that's why I didn't notice him. But
I think it's also one of those strange ones where Giancarlo has, like, I kind of associate a certain visual presence with him as well, as sort of like this like business suit wearing guy. That was not Baxter Stockman. Oh no,
he's a eccentric nerdy scientist character who's obsessed with what he's doing. Ice Cube is Superfly, and
they did a great job.
Honestly, like, one of my biggest laughs of the whole movie was actually on the credits when it just said, "and introducing Paul Rudd." That really made me laugh.
That.
Yeah, it's going through all the cast, and at least Paul Rudd to last, and introducing Paul Rudd. Yes, this 50-year-old man who's been heavily featured in movies for the past 2.5 decades.
That just strikes me as Seth Rogen, as he was a major producer in this movie, as just messing with him.
Oh, probably.
It's just like a running gag between him and Paul.
It's probably just this idea that he keeps not aging, so they're just kind of joking that he's new still. Yes, but of course his debut was in Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers, and I know that because I'll never forget how awful it is. So, yes, there's that.
It's gotten better with time. Really? There's some hardcore Paul Rudd fans.
Oh no, I thought you meant Halloween 6. So yeah.
Oh no. I'm talking about Paul Rudd's acting career.
Oh yeah, Paul Rudd's career's obviously gotten better.
So after that, we got Ray Fillet, who's Post Malone, and of course they make him like a singer the whole time. Genghis Frog is Hannibal Buress, which I enjoy Hannibal Buress every time I see him. I feel like he was underutilized in this. His character didn't have enough to do.
I mean, at this point, he's like the 15th name in this list. I mean,
that's true.
Yeah. Like, how much left is there going to be for him?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then for people watching us on YouTube, the only other major thing is that the next credited guy of Jimmy Donaldson, aka Mr. Beast on YouTube, is Times Square guy. I didn't notice him. I have no idea who he was, but somehow he got into this movie.
This is the first time hearing about this guy being a YouTuber, to be honest.
He's not the kind of circles you would run in.
That's perfectly fair. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's too much more to say without getting into the spoilers, so we can start going through things.
As always, the one thing I'll throw out there, soundtrack, loved it.
Oh,
loved this soundtrack.
Well, it depends what you're talking about here, because there's two notable things. So there's a lot of like notable songs in the soundtrack, but the score is by Trent Reznor,
which is also great.
Yes. It's funny how you always go to soundtrack first. Like, score's first to me. Soundtrack, like, the songs are like secondary. The score is the important part.
I would agree for most like prestige films and stuff like that, but this one had so many scenes that were set to just normal songs, specifically the chase scene, which we'll get to because I loved every frame of that sequence. But I think that the songs chosen in this did a great job of putting back in that sort of teenage vibe sort of thing. These are the sort of songs that I would expect to find on a 15-year-old's iPhone or something like that, you know?
Yeah. If I'm going to actually, before we get to spoilers, if I'm going to like hand it with any more slight critiques, because it has arcs for the characters, it tells a good story, animation's gorgeous, most of the characterizations are good even to an old school Turtles fan, Splinter being kind of the obsession. I'd maybe say there's maybe just a little bit too pop culture referencing going on, just maybe a little too much of that.
I can see that. I somewhat agree, but I also want to point out the fact of, if you look back on the original Turtles trilogy, there was tons of pop culture referencing there as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's out of place. It's just the sort of thing that when we come back in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's going to date this movie severely.
What's so weird about it, though, is that I don't mind when they reference something old. I won't spoil what it is, but there's a reference early on to an older movie in this, and that felt more natural to me than referencing things that are, like, current. Like, I don't know what it is. There's something about something already being older where it feels kind of timeless, where...
Well, it's the survivorship bias, where you can reference stuff that has managed to stick around, and it makes it's managed to stick around, it's like, that thing's just going to be eternal. Whereas the stuff that's modern day, we don't know what of that stuff is going to be around in 5 years or so. We don't know if it's all going to be still something that we even recognize or not. Yeah.
It feels kind of timeless. It's just, it's the reason why... I always bring this up on top of 2001, but Kubrick using a lot of classical music in that, despite the fact that he was making a futuristic movie set in space, is the idea is it contrasts with the futurism. It's like, hey, this is timeless because this is all, and none of it's dated because of that, because it was classical music in 1968 and it's still classical music now. It's not like he was using the Beatles or whatever was relevant at the time. So... yeah, alright, so we'll get into it then. Spoilers for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. We'll get into it and talk about it. The movie opens with a a prelude set in the past, which does lead into the creation of the turtles. Or you don't actually see it in the opening scene. You sort of get that, this canister of ooze is going down to the sewers at the end of the scene. So it's like, that's going to sync up with that. But it's TCRI, not TGRI, which I get those two mixed up a lot because in the movies, the old movies, it was TGRI. I think it's TCRI in the comics. I don't know why they changed it. Whoever did change it first, but
TCRI was changed to TGRI in the '91 film to remove the alien origins of the ooze, because C stands for cosmic.
You know what? Okay, that's a good reason. That makes sense. But it does tell you that they weren't going to do any sort of Technodrome stuff.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So there's like a SWAT team from TCRI coming for Baxter Stockman, who's been making mutants with these secret, lab that he's got in his house. Yeah. And it's a whole big sequence, and he's like basically calling his mutants his children, and the Fly escapes at the end, and that goes on to grow up and become Superfly, and that's kind of the point of the backstory.
We see all the tiny little like fetal versions of a rhinoceros and like a warthog and a gecko and stuff.
Yeah, you even see like schematics, or if you that's the right word, but like on the wall there's like a drawing of what the rhino will look like when he's older, and things like that. So there's a lot of like teasing here for the mutants that would be coming later. And part of me was wondering if some of them wouldn't be in the movie. I was like, oh, this is your Easter egg, and you're like, oh, they may show up in the second movie kind of thing. But no, they all show up. They all appear. Credit where credit's due. But because this is the first sequence in the movie, this is where like you're really noticing a lot of this animation stuff. You're noticing the lines coming off the light and changing between each frame of the animation. You're noticing but I don't know how they did this. I don't know if they did like a base layer in CG and then literally just drew this stuff on top.
That's what I'm thinking. There was one sequence, I don't know when it happens, when we do like a push past this like box truck as we're zooming in towards a shop. And it's the first time I really noticed it, is that all of the textures on the box truck stay static. Like they don't change from frame to frame. But as we're pushing in, they're also scaling with the truck, which makes me think that underneath all this, there's just like a Blender basic ass like gray like squares and stuff like that. And then they just pasted these sort of scribbles on top of it. And when it's a thing like an energy source or a light or something, that's the sort of thing that changes between frames.
Yeah. So we spend the next good 10-15 minutes just introducing who the Turtles are, what their life is like just now, and that they're underground, they're not allowed to go out except for errands, and we're introduced as if they're going to do something big, because it's obviously the movie, when it starts off, they're not actually doing any vigilante stuff yet, but it pretends that they are for a moment, where Leo's like doing a gruff voice and he's like, right team, we have to be on scene, we have to go do this, and then they all make fun of him because they're there to get groceries, but they have to go in and sneak in without it being seen.
They literally make fun of his Batman voice.
Yes, which I did think was a weird choice, given that the live action movies just made fun of Raph for having a Batman voice. It was an interesting thing to immediately do again.
I mean, you say immediately, it's been like 5 years.
Relatively speaking.
Which, by the way, this is as good a place as any. This movie is set in 2023. This movie is set modern day. These turtles are 15 years old. They explicitly say that.
Yes.
These turtles were born in 2008. Just like really wrap your head around that. These turtles were born in 2008. Because there's a scene later on when we show them as like tiny turtles, like infants, where they run into a woman who's using her iPhone. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How could the iPhone be there when they're so young? And then all of a sudden I'm hit with that aging at the end of Saving Private Ryan, when I suddenly become 80.
Yep. That sounds right. Yeah, I mean, that's the year Dark Knight came out. It's been 15 years. Just got to accept it. We're all dying slowly.
God.
Yeah.
Not to give too much, but within the next 3 days after this movie comes out, I'm turning 30. So.
Yeah, I'm already past that, but it's funny. It's funny. It's still funny watching you have to go through that realization.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna like freak out during our next filming thing. Just have a little crisis on camera. It's all good.
Yeah, that's fine. So no, but the movie introduces that they have to stay hidden from the humans, that they all want to be more involved in the outside world. They all kind of, because, you know, after they're done with the groceries, it's like, oh, we're meant to go back to Splinter immediately. But the other three are like, no, let's go do something. He doesn't know. He's like a hermit. He doesn't know how long it takes to get groceries. We could go do something else first and then go back. And they say, oh, there's a movie playing. There's an outdoor movie thing happening. Let's go watch the movie. So they go and watch the movie, and I thought this was an interesting. I actually quite like this choice, but the movie's just the real live action movie. They don't like do any animation effects.
That threw me off when it first showed up.
I'm like, oh, I'm kind of into this choice actually, but it's Ferris Bueller. Ferris Bueller's playing, and I thought this was a really good character introduction because it shows you how out of touch the Turtles are with real life, because they're like, wait, is this what going to school's like? You can like overtake a parade anytime you want, and they're like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, like literally, because all of their knowledge of what being a teenager is actually like comes from movies. They have this warped view of what it is, and I thought that was a really interesting way to set up their disillusionment, but also like partly why they're attracted to being normal so much is because their idea of normal is actually very heightened and magical, and like, hey, you get to live this kind of life. So,
which I mean, really in fairness, even what actually is normal is better than what they currently have. Like, it is still an improvement regardless.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it sort of makes it this more fantasy thing for them.
Oh, yeah.
That, you know, it really clicks with their characters. And when they do go home, and we're introduced to Splinter. Now, I said I didn't like Splinter because I don't really like that he's not as wise. You know, I don't like that he sounds the way he does. But I do actually like this idea that he is prejudiced and scared of humans. Like, he doesn't like humans, he hates humans, he doesn't want to trust them, and it all comes back to this experience where he tried to take the turtles outside when they were babies because they wanted to go outside, and immediately people were like, it's a rat man, they're freaks, you know, try and kill them quickly as possible. And we get this flashback. I will say, you pointing out that they were born in 2008 does make me question the joke of having Splinter with the 70s mustache in the flashback, because it's not the 70s.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to explain it away in that they only had access to whatever stuff they had. And it's one of those things where, and I love the way they explain this in the movie, is that Splinter says, when I was hit with the ooze, I was already a middle-aged rat. So I became a middle-aged big rat.
Man rat,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and you guys were babies, so you stayed babies. It makes sense if you think about it. And it's just, I love that little point there where it's like, we know it's stupid, but we're going to go with it. But I think it's playing on that idea that if he were actually middle-aged in 2008, he would have been born in like 70s, 80s. So therefore, he would have had that sort of style going to him.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about him saying, okay, I need to tell you this story again to remind you why we don't interact with the human world. I think I like that device in the sense that if you're an old school Turtles fan, there's part of you that's like, oh, do we have to do the origin again? Like, we've seen this in multiple movies. So I appreciate that even in the movie, it's framed as, I'm telling you this again. So it comes from this idea of, no, we're reminding you of these details because these are the details that are relevant to this specific version. So it's an interesting conduit just to make it feel like natural, which I appreciate.
And I do like how it gets set up. The whole reason that Splinter finds out is because they all sneak in, and then Leo breaks. Leo explains, we went to go see a movie, and all of his brothers gang up on him for not covering their backs.
Leo's trying to be the honorable one. He's trying to be the good guy, and yeah, I think, like, I don't necessarily mind the idea that after this experience where, like, he almost lost these 4 children because he's been hunted by humans on the surface, that he wanted to train them to defend themselves, and we get this montage of, like, martial arts movies and them reading books and him looking at even YouTube videos of people doing martial arts lessons, and that's how they learn.
Half of these videos are just actual people.
Yeah.
Like, I think they just typed martial arts training into YouTube and picked whatever they found.
Yeah. Sent an email saying, hey, we want to use it for the movie. Here's a check for, you know, a couple $100. Sign off, please. Yep. This was a fun montage, and I do like it. I think the only thing I don't like about it is the extension to Splinter not being as wise as he should be, because he is just kind of this schlub who decided to teach himself and his kids. ninja. I get the choice to move it away from the classic version of the story, but I am quite fond of, like, either he was like the man in Japan who had all these skills, or he was the pet rat of the, I mean, admittedly that does sound ridiculous, he had a pet rat, but you know, right. Like, still, that's like the one change in this, from like a backstory point of view, that I'm not as hot on, but I do actually really like this montage of like seeing all the old martial arts movies and the YouTube videos and them training alongside it. I do actually think that's a really fun sequence.
I guess the biggest problem that it arises is that there's no reason why he would be Master Splinter. Yes. He would be on the same level as his sons, if not slightly worse, because he's older.
Yeah, so, I don't think they ever call him that in this, actually. They just call him Dad.
Just call him Splinter and Dad, yeah.
Yeah. So I do miss that a little bit, but you know, it's a new version. I can accept that there's going to be some differences to the overall idea. It's just the only change that I think I would have like. I still think I'd have liked him to be, you know, Sensei Splinter. And like the idea that maybe he knew some of this from being around a human who did it, and then like still made the choice to teach them for the same reason. Still have the scene where, you know, they almost get hurt or killed, and he's like, okay, we have to be able to defend ourselves against the humans. I'm going to pass on these things that I know, and that's still the motivation. But you know, there was
a whole thing where he was more or less a cognizant rat in New York, and he, like, everything was trying to kill him more or less, and that's why he was so fearful. They easily could have worked in a bit where he, like, you know, his little nest or whatever he had was outside of like a karate dojo or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, for sure. Which is interesting though, because in the sequels, eventually, you know, if and when, we're in spoilers, so the mid-credit scene is exactly what you think it's set up.
Absolutely.
Like, so they're doing the mid-credit scene. There's a few little comedy bits, but then at the end of the mid-credit scene, like the evil TCRI woman's like, call in, like, not him, call in him, call in the Shredder, and you just see like the bit over the shoulder shot of Shredder looking at New York, and I'm like, F yeah, like, to see if I was in an audience like full of nerds, I'm sure that they've been cheering and like stuff, but it was a bunch of kids and like parents and whatnot.
Can I just real quick, if we're talking about the theater, can I just share my experience?
Here we go.
Well, it's not a bad one. I just felt so strange in that, so I went into the theater maybe like 15 minutes before it started, bought my ticket because it was midday on a Monday. There was no way anyone was going to show up. But there were 3 seats already taken.
I mean, you say that, but it's summer, right? Like, the kids are off school.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's what I was saying. There were 3 seats already taken. So I was like, okay, no problem. Like, probably just, you know, someone and their kids. So I got my seat for the front row, and then I sat down 10 minutes before the movie.
Whoa. You chose the front row?
I chose the front row.
Why?
It wasn't as close as it has been. Like, this was a theater where it gave a bit more leg room.
Okay.
Anyway, so I sat in the front row. I looked behind me. No one else was in the theater yet. So I was like, oh, you know, they must just be at the snack bar or whatever. They'll come in eventually. Movie starts, go through the whole movie. At the very end, as the credits start up, I sit up, I stretch, I turn around. Theater's empty except for one usher who's staring at me because I'm the only person in there. And I'm like, I have to wait for the mid-credits scene, so...
Yeah, I didn't know there was going to be a mid-credits scene. I just had a feeling like this feels like the movie that might have one. Because especially since I know they can tease either Shredder or Krang or something. They can tease anything they want here. And it was Shredder, it was the obvious one. But the reason why I was bringing that up is that by having this backstory for Splinter, there's no connection in their backstories between Splinter and Shredder like a lot of other adaptations have. So I'm curious like how that'll play out. It's kind of nice not having it there, to be honest, because it is just kind of like whatever. But it does, you know, it does, and you shouldn't think of this too seriously, but it does sort of raise that question of, okay, they're all sort of self-taught, so it's like, Shredder's actually going to be this like badass, like, you know, ninjutsu warrior. Like, if anything, it should make it more uplifting and like fulfilling if like Leo or one of the turtles is able to actually, you know, fight him.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, I guarantee you, because it wasn't too much in this movie, but I guarantee you that the whole thing's going to be they try to fight him individually and he's just too strong, and then through the power of family, blah blah blah.
Yeah, hell, maybe he'll even kill Splinter by the end of the movie.
That's possible.
If they want to do an Empire Strikes Back and do like the dark ending before the third one. Because they've already
I'd be down
greenlit the
with that.
sequel, by the way. That's already happened.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And they're doing a cheaper, like, animated series for 2 seasons between movies that will bridge the gap apart. Which, funny enough, given the way this movie ends, I'm like, okay, I get what that series is going to be now. It's going to be Turtles going to high school, and that's just going to be the sitcom that they're going to do for 2 years.
It's going to be straight up the thing where it's superheroes by night, high schoolers by day.
Yeah. But anywho, so back to where we were. So they did all the backstory. We learn all that stuff, and it's like, okay, the Turtles are all sad about it, but they go to bed. And they're like, damn, we're never going to get to be in the real world. And obviously, if you've listened to all our reviews for the other movies, you know, the second live action one from, you know, just a few years ago did sort of like play on some of these themes. It was this idea of wanting to integrate into the real world, but the humans won't accept us. It's an obvious, you know, step in analogy for any kind of outsider, whether it be because you know, you're a minority, or maybe even something in the case of mutants more specific, like maybe you have, you know, like. I don't want to say defect necessarily, but it's something that makes you individually different from everyone else. Maybe you've got a medical condition where your face is different from everyone else. You know, something that
right.
You know,
and that is one thing I did want to point out with the art style of this movie, because I think it was a fantastic choice. Is that the mutants and April are the only characters in this movie who have like what I would consider symmetrical faces, like they are normal looking. All of the other human characters have like this weird lumpiness to their face that just makes them slightly more off-putting and ugly looking, which I think works great for the idea of what the movie's saying is like, oh, well, these mutants are outcasts, whatever like that. But from our perspective, they're the ones who are actually like pleasing to the eye, and the humans are the ones that are a bit more off-putting and dangerous looking.
Yeah, that's fair. And obviously that also extends to the other mutants, because even like Superfly, like, you know, he's very lopsided as far as like what side has like a bigger arm or whatever. And that's the other thing we sort of learn around here, is that there's a crime wave going on. Some supervillain named Superfly stealing a bunch of stuff, specifically from places like TCRI. He's clearly building something that he's stealing all this like science tech for and whatever. So we get like a little siege sequence where he flies like this armored truck away. You get a good look at him. You just get to see the wings fluttering above the. You know, they save the reveal for what he looks like until later when the turtles meet him. But that's the whole thing.
But you get that he is not a normal person, because when the normal people see him, they're like, "Oh, Jesus, what the heck is that?"
Yeah. So. Yeah, the movie, like, you know, obviously this is always a bit more of a challenge when it's a movie we saw in the theaters, and it's been a day for me, 2 days for you to get the exact timeline. So forgive us if we're going a little out of order here, but I guess the next big thing is to talk about them meeting April, right?
Yes, this is they got grounded for a month. They finally got ungrounded here, and now they go out to go get more supplies. And
they are simply, and actually something we should set up for later is that one of the things Splinter says to them is that he's scared that if they ever get captured, they'll be put in a lab, and he specifically says that they'll be milked, to which the turtles say, we don't even have nipples. And it's this running thing when they say this again to April, and they're like, why does he keep thinking we're going to get milked? We're not going to have, you know, nipples. And it comes up again when they speak to the mutants. It's like, it's not even the rule of thirds. They say it like 4 or 5 times, and then when they do actually get captured by TCRI and they're hooked up to this machine, and she's explaining, I want to make more mutants, so there's only one way to do that. I'm going to have to take your blood and like use it. And then the turtles look at each other and go, wait a minute, is she going to milk us? And
behold the Mega Milker 2000.
And okay, I guess it's technically milking, but it works for the joke. But yes, them constantly talking about being milked was like an absurdly, like, just slightly adult joke to me, because it just sounds a little dirty, like, the entire time.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where as a kid you feel like it's this naughty thing where you're like, oh ho ho tee hee, but then as an adult you realize, like, okay. But it's still like funny the way that they deliver it each time.
Yeah, every time it's funny. So that's a running thing throughout the movies. The like them just sort of laughing off this fear of being milked, only to actually be milked at one point later in the movie. It's good stuff. So yeah, basically they're just messing around with their weapons, and this is the thing, by this point in the movie you've realized, they've never actually been in a fight with humans before, or anyone for that matter. They've only trained together, and they've never really used their weapons. So they're actually practicing with their weapons by making dumb videos of cutting up melons, and then Raph's going to use throwing stars on like one Micah's holding, and this is how they meet April, because the throwing star misses and hits her like bicycle helmet, right, and she gets knocked off her little scooter, and they're like looking over the edge, and she's like really mad, and she's shouting up at them. But as this is happening, some thug sneaks up behind her and steals her scooter.
Yeah.
And the Turtles feel responsible. Leonardo's like, look, this is our responsibility. We did this. Also, Leo's got the hots for her. That's another thing.
I was going to say, we got to bring that up.
Yeah. He's like, a kid in a teen rom-com like Ferris Bueller. He's got the eyes. I mean, he doesn't actually literally do the eyes turn into hearts, but that's what it's like when he's looking at her.
Yeah, there's a whole thing where he's like, look, she got her scooter stolen because of us, because we distracted her, and now we have to go save that beautiful, perfect woman's scooter.
Which is interesting, because I don't feel like in all the Turtles things I've watched, I don't know how many of them have ever really tackled the idea of the Turtles wanting a romantic connection with a human before.
I mean, the only thing I remember is that Mikey occasionally just hit on her, but it never seemed like it was serious.
Yeah, he would sort of talk like she's pretty and whatever, but yeah, it never felt like he was actually angling for anything. Whereas this was more like, oh no, this is like hormones kicking in, which would suggest that all four of them at some point are going to feel the longing for a relationship. And it's even something that comes up with Splinter later, which is funny at first, but all the actual stuff with his like relationship later is also like it's part of the Splinter stuff I didn't like.
That's fair. It comes out of nowhere and it's very strange, but yeah, it's something, I guess.
I guess, like, other than the actual backbone narrative with Splinter, which is that he fears humans, he doesn't want these turtles to go out there, but then obviously by the end realizes no, they want that, so he should want them to be happy. There's an arc there from that arc is actually perfectly fine, but other than that, he is played purely for comic relief. And I think that's what I don't like about him. I think there's just, you can have comic relief with Splinter for sure, but you need a bit more of the wise father figure in there.
That's the thing. In this, he's the bumbling dad instead of the wise figure. And that's, it's a different character. It's a different take, but it is something that, as a longtime Turtles fan, I get why you're upset about it.
Yeah. So our first big action sequence is they chase this scooter guy to this garage, right? This or garage for the Americans, and they come in and they're in shadows at first or whatever. But we get this large fight sequence, and so there was something to set up actually just before this, where I think it's just at the start of this fight actually, or before it when they're talking about it, where Donatello realizes that all he has is a stick. He says, all you guys have got these ways, and I've brought this up in prior reviews. Every Turtles fan has this realization at some point where they realize, wait, nunchucks, sai, and katana, they are all badass, deadly weapons. And then a stick. Donatello gets shafted with the stick. And this movie goes out of its way, kind of for comedy purposes, but actually shows just how versatile and useful this stick is repeatedly.
Yeah. It's the perfect thing for Donatello, being the one who has to think his way out of situations rather than brute force. Because
he uses it to go under the car at one point here. He uses it later on. There's a great bit later on, like when they're trying to like sabotage a car ride, where like we have to like get to that brake pedal under the seat. If only we had something long but also sturdy to and Donatello's like, I've got a stick. I've got a stick. And then there's one point in a fight later on where someone's using it against him. He's like, they're using my stick against me. There was like a really conscious through line that felt like, okay, you know what, people make fun of Donatello's stick, we're going to have fun proving, hey, you can do a lot with a stick. Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's the thing, is like he's the only one who got to focus on his weapon. Everyone else just kind of did their own thing with it. It didn't feel like anyone had a real focus to it. That being said, I loved the intro to this scene because, like you said, they never have been in a fight before this. So they come in, they think they're about to face down just like one guy who stole the scooter. Meanwhile, it's this entire room full of big burly guys who are all about to attack them. And so they try to make the first move, and everything just goes wrong all at once. Like a shuriken gets lodged in, I think it's Donatello's leg, and like everyone's falling over each other. But then very quickly they start to get into the groove of their training and how they manage to fight against these guys. And I think it's a great job of showing, while they may not be, hyper competent, they may not be amazing fighters at this point, they are still good enough to do this stuff. And when they're done with it, they freak out like normal teenagers would. They're like, oh my God, did you see that? That was amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. They're going for this idea that they are obviously amateurs, but they've trained in theory for a long time. But you mix that with the fact that they are stronger and faster than humans because of their turtleness.
Yes.
That basically it works out that these like sort of like low bit thugs are the perfect first opponents for them to realize, hey, we can actually do this. We actually are able to pull this off. And it's a good fun sequence. And it ends with, of course, with like April shows up to get her scooter back, and then the turtles walk out the shadows, and this whole thing. Also, repeatedly during this scene, the bad guys refer to them as the Shreks.
Yeah, they look like little Shreks to me.
Do you think this was an intentional thing? Because people were saying that in those two live action movies that they look kind of like Shrek. Was this like a direct reference?
I don't think so. I doubt it, but it's possible Seth Rogen would have been like, let's just, if we're gonna do it, let's just bring it out into the forefront.
I don't think it's surprising, especially since this is the same scene where the car radio turns on and what do you hear? Yeah. Go ninja, go ninja, go. And that is just for the people who are in their 30s who remember Turtles 2. Okay?
No doubt. Yeah.
That's who that's for. There's a fan base at work here.
This movie does a great job of calling back to all eras of the Turtles. I don't think it makes it feel like, you got the 80s, you do have the more modern stuff as well. I don't think that this is it doesn't shun any Turtles fan from enjoying it.
Yeah. And this is where it really kicks off the plot, which is they're talking to April, and she wants to be a journalist. She's writing for her school paper, and she, for some reason, and this is terrible plan for any teenager. She's actually trying to write about this crime boss who's like, taking the city by storm. And just a bit of advice for any actual like 16-year-olds out there who write for the school paper: don't try and investigate a dangerous criminal on your own.
Well, she has a perfectly reasonable explanation in that if this crime boss, if Superfly is allowed to roam the streets, prom will be canceled. Can't have that.
So the Turtles don't like the idea that she's going to take notes and write an article about them, because she obviously looks at them and goes, oh, hey, this is my later on there's a joke where she says I'm going to get a daytime Emmy, but that's kind of the vibe, is like, oh, hey, like if I reveal the Turtles to the world, I'm going to be like, instantly I'm just a success. And they're like, look, how about this? You help us find this villain, because we've just realized that we can be heroes, and if we be heroes, which made you like us, then maybe everyone will like us if we save the city. So you help us, and then you can sort of write about us and reveal us. And
I love how there's a tiny little bit before that where they're like, look, can you honestly tell us that there are other people out there like you who can accept us for who we are? And she stands up and the music swells and she's like, no, people are awful. They're never going to like you.
Never, no. And obviously as soon as they said this, I'm like, okay, this is good, because what this is it's setting up this journey to be the Ninja Turtles, but the reason they've just given for wanting to do it is wrong. And that's the point of the movie, is that by the end they have to realize that they have to be able to do it for the right reason, not because they want to be accepted by everyone else. And that's a big dramatic point later when they're hated by everyone, when they're seen in the streets and they all hate them, and Leo says, it doesn't matter, we should still save them anyway. That's the true moment where they become heroes. Absolutely. Here it's selfish, later on it's this act of selflessness.
I did also appreciate this. They give a little even more animated, like it's a coloring book sort of style, as they're going through their plan of, all we'll have to do is catch this Superfly guy, deliver him to the police, and everyone will love us. And they're done in the style of like the classic looking Turtles.
Yeah, the classic comic book, yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, where that's how they see themselves in their mind's eye, is these like bigger, like hulkier Turtles, the way that they previously were.
Yeah, and this leads to like going to the high school, where we find out April's got a track record. She tried to do the news show that broadcast throughout the school,
Yeah.
And she threw up on camera, and she's known as April O'Puke.
Puke girl.
Yeah, but April O'Puke was what written on her locker.
Yeah, kids are very creative like that.
Yeah. Although at the end it turned into someone scored it out and put an April O'Hero or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was they flipped it. Yeah, so yeah, but they're like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's a high school, and April's like, it's just a bit shit. It's falling apart. It's not very nice at all. But they're enamored with it.
There was one moment where Donatello sees that somebody has like an anime sticker on their locker.
Oh, I see. It's Attack on Titan.
Yeah, he just geeks. He's like, I don't even know this person, and yet I want them to be my best friend.
Yeah, I think the line he has is like, I've only seen this on a locker, but I've gotten more from this person than anyone's ever given me my entire life.
Yes, that's what it was. That's so good.
Yeah. Which, I mean, obviously we see them stealing stuff from the grocery store, so I assume it's all stolen, but there was a part of me when they were in bed earlier on where they've all got like smartphones in their hands. Donnie's got a laptop, and I'm like, where are you guys getting all this from? And do you have a contract so you can actually, access the internet? I mean, are you just like tapping into someone's Wi-Fi? Like, what's going on here?
I mean, it's iPod touches. You don't need the cell service. You just pick up on other people's Wi-Fi signals. There you go.
iPod touches.
Yeah, from way back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if they did manage, because that would have been like 2010, 2011 when those were still around. I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to keep those alive for this long.
Yeah, but it's present day. I assume they've got new stuff. I didn't think they had stuff from their childhood.
I mean, they don't focus on it, but it's the sort of thing where you either have to square the problem of, did they straight up steal these out of people's bags, or do they somehow manage to get these cell phone plans despite Splinter saying no?
At least if they stole them from the companies instead, that doesn't feel as bad as stealing from a person.
Oh yeah, no.
But,
screw big corporate.
Yeah. So they check out the plan. She's got like a murder board with the pins and the string and all that, and it's like, okay, how do we find this? And they go looking. This is where you get your montage, I think, of like them like showing up to all these different locations, and they do this neat thing where in each location it's a different turtle who's at the front, so it sort of equally distinguishes like each location and fight by whatever turtle was leading the charge.
But the fight scenes, they like, everyone's throwing the same punches at the same time. Everyone's doing all the same movements, so they're able to seamlessly just split between all of the fights as the song, and it's set to No Diggity as well, which is beautiful choice there. I just love this scene. I think this was a fantastic scene for action in this midpoint of the movie.
And they get some information about where like the next thing's going to be stolen or whatever. They get some thugs who have been paid off to like pick up this next scientific device, and they end up getting it themselves, right? And it turns out Donnie can drive because he's played a lot of Forza Horizon 5. Yeah. And actually, I'll just mention this here because I don't know where it comes in exactly, but there's a certain point where Splinter's like feeling lonely and he's like, the turtles are always out. So he sends like a message saying, hey, it's an emergency, sons, come home. And he throws them a surprise party with lots of pizza. And the movie has already established they love pizza because April buys them a pizza. They're very ecstatic about the pizza. Yeah. And they come in, it's a pizza party. He's like, hey, I brought the outside world to you. And he's got cut-out stand-ups of all the Chrissies. He's got Chris Evans, Chris Pine, and Chris Pratt. Chris Pine's in his Starfleet uniform specifically. But these are like live-action stand-ups. They're not animated. So, it's, again, there's a real interesting visual quality to it. And they're like, sorry Dad, we got to dip out, but I just wanted to mention that scene because
it's good. It really sets the plot forward for Splinter at that point, because he very easily at this point has just been in the background. He could have been totally ignorant as to what the turtles were doing, but this scene is what sets him as, no, I do care about my kids and I'm trying to get involved with them. I'm trying to like make them happy, but I'm going about it the wrong way. I'm trying to still keep them out of the thing they want, because he finds their quote unquote human clothes and human items like all across their room. And the conclusion he comes to is not let them out there where they want to be. It's, okay, keep them boxed up, but just let them have a couple flourishes here and there.
Yeah. So they get this truck with the science device and the meeting place for Superfly. So we get our big meeting scene where Superfly and all the other mutants show up. And it's got an interesting sort of swerve to it where when they see each other, the turtles are just kind of excited that there's other mutants, and the other mutants are excited to see the turtles, and they end up just hanging out in a bowling alley and like playing arcade games, and it's all fun and games until Supervi just casually mentions that his plan with what he's building is to turn all the animals on Earth into mutants with this big device, and then one of the turtles, being a bit more concerned, just goes, "And what would happen to the humans in this scenario?" And Superfly says, "Well, most of them will die. Some will be our pets, maybe our slaves. I don't know. Well, I'll make it up as I go along." And April's actually listening to this through like a headpiece the whole time, and she's like, "Guys, you got to stop him now. You got to stop him any minute now. Stop him. Stop him,
please.
Get a
chance. Just go ahead and not let him do that thing that's going to kill me."
Yeah, because when they go outside and the turtles say, "What if we're not down with this plan to kill all the humans?" and the tone drops immediately, and then Leo tries to save it. It's like, "Hey, no, I'm okay with killing all the humans," and it just cuts to April. She's like, "I'll cut that part out."
Yeah, because she's been recording all of their stuff to try to make them out to be heroes.
Oh so dear. So we end up with, they're all in different vehicles, but like two of the, I guess Gecko and one of the others are driving the van that the turtles are in, and they've got one of the device that they brought with them, and they're driving, and they want to try and stop the car, and this is where they use the stick to I should say staff, but they kept calling it a stick in the movie for comedy reasons. And
they as they're driving down the road, the thing is that Mondo Gecko is super chill. He's just the nicest dude, and he really gets along with Michelangelo. And as they're driving, they're playing What's Going On by Four Non-Blondes. I just need to set that up for this next part.
Yes, and they're singing. He's singing with the other mutant at the front. Yeah. They're really getting into it.
Rocksteady is the other one in there.
Yeah, they're really enjoying the song. And then they do the brakes, and it turns into a chase sequence, of course.
Yep. They bust through the windshield, and then the turtles take over the car.
And Donnie's driving about like a madman. But, and this is a whole impressive chase sequence that ultimately ends with the turtles driving, off a bridge, or they land sort of awkwardly. And this is where TCRI come up and like kidnap them, because they're all kind of, knocked out or like weak or whatever.
So during that chase sequence, the thing that got me, and maybe you just were not exposed to this, is that there was a meme version of What's Going On by Four Non-Blondes, sung by just some dude, set to the old 80s He-Man cartoon on YouTube. It's been up for like 12 years now. And that meme version is the version they play as they're doing this chase scene the whole time.
Oh, really? No, I am not aware of this meme, so that flew over my head.
I just loved it because it's so pointless. There's no reason to have this meme playing over this thing, but it's so fun at the same time that I loved every second of this chase scene.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things for me in animation is to make me care about action sequences, and it was something actually I definitely was surprised about how much I enjoyed it in the TMNT Batman movie that we did for Patreon. That I was very impressed with the 2D animation in that and making me actually like the fight scenes. I think the same thing goes here with this chase scene and the later action scenes and the earlier ones, is that I actually enjoyed them. And I think it's we're at a point now with animation where you can do it in a way that appeals to me and what I like to see in cinema. Whereas I think traditional animation, both CG and 2D, I think can struggle with stuff that's more dynamic than simple, movement.
I think it's an issue of you in any animations that I really think of. It's hard to really feel that punch. It's hard to really feel like there is an impact to it because everything has always felt, like we said, so Pixar. It's always felt like, a toy flying backwards rather than some actually living thing. But now that we're getting more stylized with it, you stop feeling that toy aspect and start picking up on the art aspect, and that allows you to get back that feeling of momentum again.
Yeah. So the turtles are held captive, and it looks like April abandons them. Although, I mean, I think everyone watching knows what she's doing. She's going to go to Splinter for help because.
But these are a bunch of 15-year-olds. I can understand why they're like, oh, they betrayed us.
Yeah, because earlier on, I think it's the surprise party scene where they actually bring her with them, but say, hey, you have to stop here. We live around the corner in the sewers, but you need to stay here because Splinter doesn't like humans. And she's like, well, that's fair because I don't like rats. But sure enough, she shows up to Splinter and says, hey, your sons need your help. They've been kidnapped. And And as much as I have my critiques about Splinter's characterization in this, it is quite heartwarming that he mounts a one-man rescue using all 4 of their weapons against the TCRI dudes to break them out. That's actually quite sweet. But yeah, this is where the turtles are all like hooked up, and it's Mikey who's being milked first, and they're like, what does it feel like? He's like, it's kind of weird. It hurts.
I remember it being like, oh, you just have to focus on something else. Focus on pizza. You love pizza. It's like, no, pizza is cheese. Cheese comes from milk. It's all coming back to milk.
And of course, the little sign on the device actually says Milker 2000 or something stupid like that.
Exactly. And they have a little moment here where they realize, like, this is it. Like, we're probably going to die. They're going to milk us until we're nothing left. And they kind of try to, like, come together as a group. And, like, I think it was Donatello says something like, oh, I never got to see BTS. And so they all start, like, trying to sing for him. And he's like, you guys don't even know the words, but thanks.
That was funny, yeah. The movie is consistently pretty funny. Like, I don't know if you've gotten that, because it's you don't want to just reiterate jokes, because you don't get the effect from it, but it is constantly quite funny.
There was this was one of the few movies where apparently they just had all of the actors all in one room rather than separated out into different cells, so that way they were able to do these sort of scenes where it's just natural. It feels like a bunch of teenagers talking over each other.
Yeah, at least the core 4 kids, I absolutely get having them together, so you can have that chemistry for sure. So Splinter breaks them out. April actually ends up stealing one of the TCR guys' bikes, which is only important in that it has like the TCRI soldiers have this like gun. It doesn't fire bullets. It fires like a goop that's meant to like.
It's a de-oozinator.
Yeah, it basically demutates anything that it hits. So that's important for later because one of the turtles has got it. But basically, what's her face? What was the villain? Cynthia Outram. She doesn't seem that concerned with what Superfly is up to, despite the fact that it's like the apocalypse for all the humans. Which maybe if there's a slight story critique is that she never seems aware or cares that this is going on. It feels so separate in that respect. But once they get out here, it's like, okay, we have to stop Superfly, and to the point where they're going after him. And I think it's not until after this, or is it during this part where they convince the other mutants to help them?
It's in during this next sequence. Yeah,
during the next sequence. Yeah,
we have the first bit where Splinter basically tells them like, "Hey, look, you guys have been running out this whole time. You've been lying to me. I'm not letting you out. Like that's you have to understand that this is the only way that I can keep you safe is by you staying inside. And so we're going to go stop him, and then you guys will never be out of my sight again, because that's the only way that I can keep you safe." So they say goodbye to April, all sad and such, because they realize this is probably where it's going to be the split up for them, and they go off to fight Superfly.
Yeah, and they go off hunting, and they get to sort of where they're building this machine. They break in, and effectively they sort of turn all of the mutant henchmen against Superfly by saying, hey, do you actually want to kill all the humans? And I don't know, I guess like Mondo Gecko, who's first, is like, I'm not really into that part.
Yeah, I never really considered anything else as an option. It just kind of seemed like it was that or nothing.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, the Turtles are presenting these other options to them, and they all kind of turn, including Bebop and Rocksteady. Like, I was not expecting Bebop and Rocksteady to be allies by the end of this movie, but here we are.
Yeah.
I wonder if like Shredder somehow is going to convert them next movie, or if maybe they're just allies now. I don't know.
I could see it going either way. I could see them doing like a bait and switch where Shredder thinks he has them under control, but it's like, nah, we're still cool.
Very interesting. But Superfly gets like during the fight gets kicked into the machine, right? And it all falls in the water. And it's like, wait a minute, the water's got a lot of life forms in it, and this machine that's meant to, mutanize everything's mutate is the word I was looking for.
I like mutanize more.
That's fair, but mutate's the correct word. And he ends up coming out like a kaiju-sized Superfly who also has like other sea creatures that sort of like just bolted to him.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. He comes out with like a whale for his body, so he's already massive. But then he gets up out of the water and immediately crashes into a zoo.
Yes.
So now he has just every animal bolted to his. The toys are calling him Mega Mutant at this point.
Okay. So he's still voiced by Ace Cube, and he's still saying some of his funny lines and whatnot. But yeah, he's stomping through. There's multiple references to Godzilla when this is going on, because naturally, and it's like, oh shit, we gotta go stop him. The other mutants are going to help. To the point where when April shows up with this, gun and whatever, we get the big slow motion all walking together shot with the turtles in the middle, April at the side, and all the other mutants behind them. It's very nice, it's just a big thing. But the big stuff that comes from all this is that they try and stop Superfly. Superfly basically beats the shit out of them and like knocks them back, and they're in the middle of New York. It's like Times Square. There's fire around, and like humans are scared of them. They're yelling and screaming, and then not only the news. Yeah,
the news this entire time has been reporting on the giant kaiju, but because the turtles were the ones out in front and fighting against everything, the news is saying that they're the ones who are in charge of this mutant.
Well, yeah, but we don't see that throughout the whole time, though. We see that when the turtles see it, because they look up, there's this sad moment in the middle of Times Square where they look up and this giant screen's playing the news, and it's saying, hey, these mutants are causing chaos, they're destroying the city, and it's the turtles photos that are all over the news. And it's this really sad moment as the camera's low down, it's doing this 360-degree shot around the turtles. And it's really heartbreaking. It's this sad moment. But this is what builds up to probably the best scene in the movie for me, from a narrative purpose, is Leo saying, no, we should save them anyway. It doesn't matter that they don't like us. We have to do this for the right reasons. We have to go be heroes because it's the right thing to do. So, sure enough.
I like how they go through, specifically Leo goes through, and he points out to each of them like why they're needed for this plan. Like they need Donnie's muscles, they need Mikey's ability to improv. Donatello's the one who comes up with the idea of Attack on Titan, of going after his weak point, because he is at this point a Titan.
Yeah, by the way, you said Donnie instead of Raph for the first one.
Sorry, Raph.
Yeah.
Donnie has muscle.
That's not what he's contributing to the plan, though, I don't think.
That's fair. And then when they get back in the car and they're about to enact a plan, Raph gives Leo credit of that's the first time you've ever actually sounded like a leader.
Yeah, so they're all kind of coming into their own a little bit. And they steal a pizza van, which I assume they're going to take the pizza off and this will become the Turtles van, because it was very similar.
Oh, probably, yeah.
So, we get this whole thing with them racing up, and they're going up through the multi-story car park, and it's all about getting up to the back of the neck, which is where the weak spot is, and they're going to throw in the juice for the anti-mutant gun. They're going to throw that into the because there's a bit earlier on where they fire the gun and it hits like a horse that's stuck to his side, and the horse becomes a normal horse again and rides away, and Superfly's like, I don't need that horse.
One horse, that's it, whatever.
Yeah, I got plenty of parts to no stinking horse.
Which I do think that if they managed to shoot the whale that makes up the majority of his body, he probably would have gone down. I don't think that's they make a whole big thing of them having to get it into his bloodstream because that's what connects all of them. But I think if they hit the whale, they probably would have won as well.
Yeah, maybe the concern is though he'll just keep grabbing more animals again.
That's true. That's possible.
So it's like, we have to take him down properly. And throughout all this, Splinter's helping as well. In fact, there's a big scene with Splinter. He basically has his Spider-Man moment where all in New York.
I'm glad you thought that, because I thought the exact same thing.
So basically, all the humans on the street, so actually to set this up as well, April breaks into Channel 6 News because she sees how they're talking about the turtles. She's like, not on my watch. And this teenager breaks in, runs up to the TV studio, grabs the mic. This actually might be the most raw, unrealistic thing in the whole movie, is that this teenager is able to just find her way into the TV studio.
That's it. As the kaiju is stepping outside the building, the most unrealistic part is that April knows where the studio is.
Yeah, it isn't stopped. I guess they're all just running scared. But she breaks in the chaos. She grabs the mic and says, no, the turtles are helping. They're fighting the Superfly monster. And she still vomits, but she keeps going. That's progress.
It's not about being better. It's about overcoming your weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads to the fact that the humans actually, there's this he's all in shadow. The human comes up to Splinter when he's been knocked down by the mutant, and puts out his hand, but instead of like, you know, because it looks like a fist at first, but then he opens it and it's like to help him. It's like, hey buddy, do you need help? So now he's being helped by the humans, and it's this sweet Spider-Man-esque moment of New York City coming to help Splinter and the Turtles. You mess with one of us,
you mess with all of us.
Exactly. So he gets help, and the Turtles are able to save the day, although not before they're like grabbed by Superfly and squeezed, and there's a whole
they
thing.
Got like all cracks and stuff in their shells, and there's this moment way earlier on where Raph tells him like, yeah, I don't want the last thing I see before I die be one of you guys, and it seems like that's how my life is going. But then as they're being crushed, he's like, you know, we're gonna die, and I'm actually kind of happy that I'm seeing you guys as my last thing here. And everyone's all, oh, Raph has a heart.
Yeah, and you know, obviously once again Splinter helps bail them out, and they're able to be Turtles, save the day. And yeah,
well, Splinter, all the humans and all the mutants, everyone works together to take down Superfly. And one thing I guess we should have brought up is that the whole reason that Splinter really gets heavily involved here and has a change of heart is that he hears Superfly echoing his own words. Because Superfly's whole thing is that they did the exact same thing. Him and all of his mutant brothers and sisters went out, tried to be in public, and they were attacked. But the difference was, instead of running, Superfly beat this guy into submission. And so his whole thing is, in order to keep you all safe, I have to do this. I have to eliminate humanity.
And Splinter hears this, and it's like an awakening for him, where he realizes he's like, you know, he sounds like the villain. He hears the villain say his own words. It's actually very similar, bizarrely, to a moment from the last Batman movie, which I won't spoil the specifics of. But there's a very similar beat in that, where it's like, oh shit, my own words have been kind of like, you know, parodied by this awful person. It kind of makes him realize stuff. So there's character growth for him, and a lot of the fallout of this, obviously there's a big scene where the Turtles are like cheered and they all start chanting Turtles, and the Turtles are like, wait, are they chanting Turtles? And it's just like they imagined earlier on. It's like, oh yeah, we'll stop Superfly and everyone will love us and chant our names. And sure enough,
it's down to the same stuff in that they mirror the same lines of like, they're heroes, and then a woman runs forward and says, sign my baby.
Yeah. It's all good stuff. So yeah, the epilogue stuff in this movie is that the Turtles are actually getting to go to high school. Like Splinter's making them lunch, and they take off their masks.
That shocked me.
Yeah, although they're color coded like Power Rangers, so don't worry. Leo's wearing a blue hoodie, you know, so on and so forth. And yeah, Leo's like helping April with her projects and asking her to the dance. Raph's like doing the student wrestling and like having a blast. Donnie's with the computer nerds. Mikey's doing his improv class. Like they're all flourishing. And Splinter's having a weird sex relationship with...
Yeah, can we talk about that for like 2 seconds here? Because it's not okay. So I'm okay with Splinter being this bumbling dad type instead of the sage master, because as a new character, that's fine. I'm willing to accept there are changes that are made. One of the mutants that just spits out this weird saliva goop all over them every time it talks, and I think it's like a cockroach mutant. Splinter's tapping that. And I'm not okay with this idea. And neither are the Turtles. They make it clear this is supposed to be gross, but like there's a whole scene where they just heavily make out, and it's just not. This felt like Seth Rogen was like, I want this scene particularly. If we do anything else in this movie, I need the scene where the rat makes out with the cockroach, and I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, and when you say you're making out, basically his entire like nose and mouth is consumed in her mouth. Like that's what it looks like.
Yep.
It's all just I wasn't super keen on that, if I'm being honest. But this is a very interesting setup. It feels very different to Turtles for me, where it's like, oh no, we're setting up that they can actually go to high school and be Ninja Turtles like at night or whatever. And presumably that's what this animated show that's sort of in the same universe is going to be doing until the second movie. And then the second movie can do like the actual Shredder story, which is what the mid-credit scene sets up. It sets up that there's an actual fight in Nemesis. And I was getting those vibes as I was watching, because I was thinking about this when they were chasing Superfly, when he's kaiju-sized around the city. I was thinking, oh, this is very Batman Begins, in the sense that you're doing a lesser villain in your first movie so that you can make the main villain, in this case Shredder, a super big deal as your sequel, your real challenge that's going to test their skills in the next one. And I think that's fascinating, because this is the first time there's been a first Turtles movie that doesn't have Shredder in the foot. And I think saving that for a second movie made this feel refreshing. But now, because they've established these Turtles, I'm actually excited to see how they tackle like them taking on a Shredder.
Yeah, it makes me wonder though what they are going to do for the show, in that clearly they'll have high school hijinks stuff, but I wonder who are the bad guys they're going to fight. Are they going to be people that we're familiar with from the Turtles franchise? Is it just going to kind of be like the goon of the week? TCRI?
Yeah, smaller characters, maybe goons that work for TCRI, but they definitely aren't going to do Shredder. The end of this teases them for the sequel. That's the second movie.
Same. Yeah.
So,
one thing worth noting here, I don't know if you're familiar, is that Cynthia Utrum is the race that Krang is.
I recognize the name. I mean, Krang's a third movie thing, surely. That makes so much sense to do that in the third one. And even then, like, Baxter Stockman is there to set up Superfly, but Baxter Stockman himself, like, you presume that he might show up in his like hybrid form later on, maybe either working for Shredder or Krang or something.
It's weird because clearly when you think about it, Baxter Stockman is supposed to be part Fly. He's supposed to be what I assume Superfly pretty much is, and it's weird that they differentiated it into these two different characters instead of having Baxter Stockman be this part insect man.
Yeah, but Baxter Stockman doesn't tend to be like the main villain. Like, he tends to be this henchman for the others. He tends to be more subservient. So I suspect that that's maybe why we made this, Superfly character here as opposed to just doing Baxter. But Baxter's still potentially there to bring back. Like, there's nothing here that says he's gone.
Technically, the demutated version of the Fly is as well. They have it in a can during the post-credit scene. So
yeah, maybe he'll merge with his son.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, oh, my boy, my baby boy, come to daddy.
Because you assume Baxter Stockman might even just be like in a lab as a prisoner somewhere under TCRI doing stuff for them.
Yeah, they showed he was in an explosion and all the stuff was gone, but they specifically brought him in. So I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up at some later point.
Yeah. It shows at least there's some foresight into what they're going to do with the sequels, even if they've not like mapped them out completely. Like, it's like, okay, we know we're going to do Shredder in the next one. We've left these different characters available. Like, there's a bit of foresight there, which is cool. Yep. But if nothing else, this movie has an arc. It has characters it introduces, which is something that not all of these movies have been able to do. I'm looking at 2014, especially. Really, really struggled with that. You said it's your best Turtles movie. I think it's the second best. I think 1990 is still the best one, but I think this is the easy shoe-in for the second best. And surprisingly, the third best, just under this, is probably Batman Ninja Turtles, the animated movie, because that was surprisingly good.
Okay, all right.
Right. And
I mean, yeah, I'll agree.
Yeah, and then I've got a lot of nostalgia for Secret of the Years, even if it's a lot kiddier and not as good. But I would take that over, anything that came after.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's clearly this is the top, followed very closely behind by Michael Bay's first outing.
Piss off.
Top tier.
You lie. You your filthy lies and deception.
Yeah, no, you can go back and look at the ratings. I'm definitely lying.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think this is a very worthy movie, though. I think for old-time fans, there's a lot here to like, even if some of the changes aren't all going to work for you. And I think for a new generation of Turtles fans, it's going to pull people in. The kids will be into it, I think. Yeah,
that's the only thing that I'm wondering is the amount of humor and also the style, I guess, because there were a few points in this movie where the humor just barely stepped its toe over what I felt was appropriate, being old man David. For instance, there's the scene where April throws up for the first time on camera, and I understand the comedy behind it. I did think it was funny, but it just felt gratuitous at a certain point, and it felt like it was doing a bit too much.
Yeah, it's maybe just a step over the line. They sort of did a thing with it though, where it's hey, they made memes out of it, and we see the versions that the other students created, where she's puking rainbows over the screen or whatever.
Yeah. They had, and they made it modern as well. They added in TikTok duets were made. So.
Yeah. It's such a minor point. I didn't really think much about it, but yeah.
I'm saying that that's the sort of thing that was the point where it kind of stepped over for me. I wonder if there's other stuff in this movie that people who are a bit less into this style of humor, this sort of improv madcap sort of thing, whether they are going to appreciate this movie at all, because it is such a large part of it, is its humor.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have threaded the needle quite well here, as appealing to old fans and making it work as its own new tone of Turtles media. I think that's quite impressive, and it'd be very interesting to see if they can do it again with a sequel. And I hope they do. I want to see these Turtles take on a Shredder and get their asses kicked and have to level up.
I want to see them beaten down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for being a little darker in the sequel, but to be fair, that's naturally what you do with a sequel, is you make the sequel just a little bit darker because you up the stakes. That's what it should do. I'm not saying it should be sending kids home crying necessarily, but I'm thinking like How to Train Your Dragon 2. Definitely felt darker on the first one. Still worked for a family audience, but definitely took it into a more threatening level.
So what you're saying is that when Shredder looks up, or comes into the movie, he looks down at the turtles and he laughs and says, "They're babies." That's supposed to be darker?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, it should do anyway. So no, I had a good time. It's a very solid movie. And I think the art style really does go. Like, I mean, I would have liked it. I think without it, like, I would have liked it enough. But I think it's what really tips it into great movie territory, as opposed to just a good new interpretation. Yeah,
if this looked like the last week's movie we did, the 07 Turtles, I don't think I'd like it as much. I think that it would have just felt too plasticky. The humor would have still been great, but like I said, my favorite scene was the montage of the fights in all the different locations. I can't even begin to imagine how that would look in the old style. It wouldn't work.
It's going back to cinema as a visual medium, and I think a lot of movies kind of forget that bizarrely, and just end up feeling quite basic. And I think a lot of CG movies over the last 20 years have kind of suffered from that. And I think for me, the visual style of this is what really puts a stamp on it, really sets it aside and says this is kind of special. And I'm totally down for another couple of these. Like, I'm totally down for this to be a trilogy, and let's do a fun couple. And hell, if I hear the show's good too, I might even watch the show. I mean, I'm not predicting it, but
yeah, no, I mean, as long as Nickelodeon saves the strongest plots for the movies and lets their B stuff be on the show, because I don't want it to be a thing where I feel obligated to watch the show to understand the movies. Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm also down for, if this is the way we want to stick with Turtles for the next decade, I'm good with that. I'd love to see these Turtles pretty much age in real time. Give me 5 years of these Turtles until they exit out of teenage.
Yeah, and
just make that work.
Yeah, and I think the more classic Turtles are still there in the comics, and I think that, just to go against the concern you have about the shows, maybe like it'd be bad if they felt like you needed to watch them, is that I think they know there's a casual audience, there's an adult audience who are not going to watch the weekly Nickelodeon show. That part of the appeal of doing a franchise like this is that you get the 30 and 40-year-olds who love it, who are going to spend their money on it, and then you have their kids who hopefully are going to love it and want all the toys, right?
Yeah.
You want that crossover between the two age groups, and I think that's the appeal of a Turtles franchise hitting big. And it's why they did have success with Transformers for a time. It's kind of cooled now because they did too much of it, but that's always the hope, I guess. So now, we've had this little interesting streak at the movies recently where, we've not done the Mission Impossibles yet because we're waiting for Dead Reckoning Part 2, but that last one got a really high rating. Oppenheimer and Barbie both get high ratings, and then this Turtles movie got a higher rating. It feels like we had this little streak here in the back half of the summer of just like movies that felt worth seeing on the big screen. And I think we both recommend this one, certainly. And we both recommended Oppenheimer for sure as well. So. Yep.
And then we can't forget about Indiana Jones. I mean, actually, no.
We can forget about that. You don't have to go see that. It's yeah. So yeah, I guess we're at the point to rate the movie. So what you giving Mutant Mayhem?
I mean, I think I gotta give this one. I got to give this one like an 8.5. I really just enjoyed it the whole way through. I did, like you said, I had some issues with the way certain things were presented. Maybe it's because I'm not as hardcore of a Turtles fan, or as one that goes back as far. I didn't have a problem with the changes made to Splinter. I think that it was a reason for the arc they wanted to tell. It was a reasonable enough change. I just think this was an enjoyable movie from start to end. There was no point in this where I was thinking, okay, well, this is getting a bit stupid or a bit long or a bit cartoony. It was just a good film, period.
Yeah. Like I say, just on the Splinter thing, it's like I actually like the story they tell with him. I just don't like his personality and voice. Right. I like the actual fear of letting these kids out, and we have to stay secret, and this is why I taught you martial arts. All of those things work. Like I like all of those things. It's just the actual presentation of them, I guess, that I don't like. But yeah, the visual style is phenomenal. It has an arc. I like the story beats. It was always visually interesting to watch. The music's good, and most of the humor lands quite well. And as a Turtles fan, I had a smile on my face for a lot of it. So I think for me, I'll be going slightly lower and just giving it a really solid 8, which is to say it's a great movie, and is only behind 1990s original live-action movie for me. Yep. So there you go. That's Mutant Mayhem. And does it make the cut?
I'd say yes. I'm not going to argue a cut above. I don't think it's quite high.
I don't think it's there yet. No, I don't think it's quite there. But I think it's. I can see a sequel getting there though. If they nail it and go into that kind of, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes escalation, or even actually, I said How to Train Your Dragon. I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 is the best of those three movies. We've not done them yet, and I'm sure we will at some point. But I think that's the peak of the trilogy, and I think it's that again that raising the stakes and going even deeper into the story of the characters. If they pull that off, and I could see these Turtles versus Shredder hitting those notes if they really want to go there.
When you have to spend the first movie, you got to spend a good 30 minutes just setting up, here's how the world is today. Yeah. Once you get to the second movie, you don't have to do that, and you can take the time to really develop the plots that you want to develop. I think they could make the second one something fantastic. I think they really could, and not even just like keeping in the same lines as this one of like, oh, it looks great or it's funny or anything like that. I think they could make it something where it actually is heartfelt and possibly darker than any other Turtles movie has really hit on, because it's really endeared us to the characters at this point.
And when we say darker, we don't mean to say that it should be darker in tone. The reason why the darker stakes are going to be so effective is because it should still start off feeling like this universe, but then the threat of Shredder is dark enough that it feels like, oh shit, like there's real stakes here. And I think this movie had some of that where, like them realizing the world might hate them is actually quite sad and is heartfelt. But I think in the second movie, giving them a threat that is actually wanting to kill them, like there's actually a serious danger, should be really effective if they can again thread that needle. And this movie is enough to suggest that they might have that in them. So hopefully, we get that, and hopefully, I wonder what they'll call the second one, because they will call it Mutant Mayhem 2. It'll be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like Enter the Shredder or something like that.
The Shredder rules. It's gotta be that.
Can't be Shredder's Revenge, even though that's a popular title in the video games and comics, because it's his first time. So they can't call him that. But have Shredder something in the title, something of the Shredder, Night of the Shredder or something. I don't know.
Age of Shredder.
That's making me think of Transformers. No.
That's fair. Don't want to bring back any of that.
Let's not think of that. Also, there was a cheap moment. I think it was in one of the flashbacks where one of the characters who was scared in Times Square was someone dressed as SpongeBob, which I think was a Nickelodeon wink wink.
Yes, however, because they also made references to things like DreamWorks and other shows and stuff like that, it didn't feel that out of place. That, and also in Times Square, like, there's tons of character actors there. I know,
but they were being cute by having it be a Nickelodeon character.
Oh, no doubt.
They knew what they were doing. Likewise, obviously, there's some product placement in here. They talk a lot about early on, Cool Ranch Doritos. Which, by the way, I think Doritos are so overrated. I'm just gonna say it. Like, it's all shit food that's not good for you. But if we're really going to have the war over this, I will take a Pringle over a Dorito any day of the week.
Here's the thing. In my wizened age,
Yes.
I agree. But I know for a fact when I was 15, I was all in on Doritos. So it fits.
I have like 2 Doritos and I'm sick of them. Like I just like whereas Pringles.
Not the Cool Ranch though. Cool Ranch just hits right for me. I can have a whole bag at once. I have the whole party size.
Okay, I mean, like, tastes are a thing. I get it, but I just the Doritos fascination is just never been something that's hit with me.
I mean, I have my sandwiches with mayo, so me and you are just never going to see eye to eye.
Oh, you filthy, disgusting human being. No.
Yep.
Anywho, that is our thoughts on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. It is pretty good. Recommend go and see it while you still can in theaters. It is a good time. So there you go. That is the movie. And then next week we will be back to the second half of our Christopher Nolan season, which is continuing on. We did his 2 earliest films in Oppenheimer before, and next time we'll be getting to his back half of his filmography outside of his science fiction and Batman movies. So we'll be looking at Insomnia, we'll be looking at Dunkirk, and we'll be looking at The Prestige. Not in that order. I just said them as they came to me. But that's what we'll be looking at. So look forward to those. So yeah, bit of maybe whiplash from dipping into Turtles and then back into Nolan. But you know, that's the beauty of cinema. There's all sorts of flavors. So we'll see you next week for that. Of course, you can get bonuses by supporting us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You know, we have like, I don't know, over 10 bonus episodes now. We do 1 a month, and they're usually loosely related to what we're doing. So any tiers on our Patreon, you'll get access to the monthly bonus episode. We did The Illusionist this month because it ties a little bit into The Prestige, I guess, for the Nolan season. But we have a whole host. We mentioned earlier when we did the Turtles movies earlier in the year, we did the Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated film, and that was actually one of the surprisingly better movies we've done as a bonus episode, to be honest. We were quite into that. So you know, check out the bonus episodes. At the $5 and up tier, you get access to another bonus show monthly called the Collector's Cut Extra Reels, where we do the worst of the worst, so bad they're hopefully amazing, but sometimes they are not. We have done things like Miami Connection, Dangerous Men. We have done at least 1 Neil Breen film so far, with more to come in the future. So it's a whole host of absurdity. A lot of those end up being available for free on things like Tubi or Pluto, so or Internet Archive and things like that. So they're usually findable if you want to watch along. And
we don't usually suggest it.
No, we don't. But yeah, so that's the second bonus show. So there's like 7 or 8 of those now. So these back catalogs of bonus content keep building up, but mostly you get to support the show and help keep it coming. So yeah, do that. And if you can't do that, that's okay. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, all those things help out as well on YouTube. Very important. So that is the show. Thank you very much for joining us. And do you know what they avoided saying in this movie? They owavoided saying cowabunga.